It's time for another episode of Let's Talk Business, featuring interviews with South Carolina business executives, community leaders, and government dignitaries. Let's Talk Business is a truly one-of-a-kind business-to-business talk show. And now, here's your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher, Rick Jenkins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina, episode number 15, actually. I'm your host, Rick Jenkins, and I'm glad you're here, whether you are checking out our video on our YouTube channel or maybe you have downloaded a podcast on Google or Apple or Spotify. Regardless of how you have found us, I am glad you're here. Got a good show for you today, as usual. Going to be talking to a couple executives. One of them is Mary Church Cornette. Mary is the owner and the CEO, head creative director as well at Fuel. They are a marketing agency headquartered in Greenville, but doing business a little bit of everywhere. Mary bought the agency not too long ago. She has been working there for about 4 years, and she comes to us from New York City. Came, like I said, down here about 4 years ago, and I look forward to hearing what brought her here to good old Greenville, South Carolina. And then also I'll be talking to Bob Morgan today. Bob is the CEO, the president at the South Carolina State Chamber of Commerce. And for those of you who don't know, the State Chamber of Commerce, they promote pro-job and pro-business policies across the state, and they are an advocate on behalf of businesses and business executives in South Carolina. They get involved in all kinds of things like workforce development initiatives, economic development initiatives, things like that. Now, Bob comes to us from Charlotte. He's been at the State Chamber for a few years now, but he spent 13 years at the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, where they had a great run there. He was the CEO. And during his 13 years there, the Chamber announced the relocation or expansion of 800 companies, including 70,000 new jobs and $7 billion in economic advancement. So we'll be talking to Mary, we'll be talking to Bob, but don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break, a 60-second break, and we're going to have a pro tip from Jeff Froman. Jeff is our financial advisor and our certified planning advisor, and he joins us every episode to provide some wealth management tips and some retirement planning advice. So we'll be back in 60 seconds. Jeff, take it away.
Thanks, Rick. This week we're talking about financial planning for business owners. 6 things that you need to consider. Tax considerations. How are you going to be organized as a sole proprietor, LLC, C Corp? They all have implications to how your tax deductions and credits work. The selection of your organization affects your tax deductions and credits. Retiring as a sole proprietor. You can do certain things as a sole proprietor that you may not be able to do with a large number of employees to help benefit your retirement. Things that should be discussed. Next, employer-sponsored plans. If you're a large employer, number of employees, then you need to offer a retirement plan to help retain those employees. It's important, as hard as it is to find and retain employees today. Next is insurance. We're talking about workman's comp, flood insurance, liability insurance. There's all kinds of different insurances that a business needs to protect itself. You need to consider the cost of all of that when you're doing your planning. And finally, employee benefits, healthcare benefits, vision, dental, things like that. Again, helps retain employees. They're all important. If you want to go into it in more depth, reach out to me, Jeff Froman, Ameriprise. Google me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Business South Carolina. Glad you're with us today, and I am here with my first guest, and that is Mary Church Cornette. Mary is the CEO and the owner at Fuel. Fuel is a full-service marketing agency headquartered in Greenville, doing business a little bit of everywhere. Mary went to the California Institute of the Arts, and then she spent quite a bit of time in New York City, and then she found her way to Greenville, South Carolina, and now she has found her way to our studio. Mary, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick.
It is good to have you here. You know, I was talking with one of your folks here not too long ago, Brittany Cindy, and Brittany was on the show, and she was telling me that she spent time in Dubai and other places across the big pond. And now you come to us from New York, even though you've been here for a while. It seems like all roads lead to Greenville.
That's right. I think they do.
So I asked Brittany what she was doing in Dubai and what led her back here, and we had a nice conversation about that. But let's talk about you for a second before we get into business. And tell me now, you've been here 4 years in Greenville.
Almost 5.
You what?
Almost 5 years.
Almost 5 years.
Yes, that's right.
And you bought out fuel, gosh, a year ago almost exactly.
That's right.
Right?
That's
So
right.
tell me first, what brought you from the big city down to little old Greenville, South Carolina?
So, as you said, I started my career with education at California Institute of the Arts. It's called CalArts for those who know it, and started my career in the dot-com boom quite a long time ago. Been in this industry for a while, and found myself in New York probably maybe 3 or 4 years after my career was underway, and spent a ton of time working at big agencies on big brands. I worked at Frog and Digitas and RGA and Publicis on large brands like GE and Verizon and American Express and Walmart. And my husband and I decided to make a change. We were living with a dog, a cat, and 2 children in a 1,000 square foot apartment, and said it was time.
Were you in Manhattan?
So we were in Manhattan for a while, and then we moved to Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, for the bulk of our time. So we were there for 16 years.
Oh, my goodness.
So we paid our dues and then moved down to Greenville, and I thought I was done. I'm going to take some time off, figure out what's next, and then I found Fuel. And Fuel was a successful marketing agency at that time for, 10, 11 years, and I fell in love.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I have been to New York several times, but it's been quite a while, and I absolutely love the city. I mean, it's one of those love it, hate it kind of places, right?
Love it.
I love it. I love the energy. And I almost, when I was 27, 28 years old, I almost moved into the city myself for a job opportunity, but I wound up not doing that. Anyway, all I'm saying is I've been there, and I love it, but my goodness, is it different than Greenville, South Carolina. And so you came to Greenville, but you're a northeastern girl. How do you like it here?
Well, it took a little bit of time to relax and
Get the speed.
Yeah. I came from a totally different speed, but over time, I have just grown to absolutely love the Greenville community, and I love my neighborhood. I'm in the North Main neighborhood, and it's been so wonderful for my children. I have an almost 13-year-old and an almost 10-year-old, and they have just thrived.
Boys, girls?
2 girls.
Oh, goodness. 13-year-old girl, man. That gives me the willies just thinking about that again.
Yeah.
Middle school with a daughter, that was tough. But, okay, well, anyway, I am glad you're in Greenville.
Me too.
And let's talk business.
Well, let's do it.
So, Fuel, you call yourself a branding agency first and foremost, right?
We call ourselves a brand building agency.
Brand building agency.
Yeah, a brand building agency.
And so let's talk about that a little bit. You're a full-service marketing firm. You do all the same types of things that all the marketing firms do, but you refer to yourself as brand building. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we specialize in brand building, which means we are experts in brand strategy and brand design, and take a brand-first approach to marketing overall. So that really means focusing on the foundational elements of a brand, because you can't market a successful or create a successful campaign without building on a really strong foundation, and that means a strong brand.
Right. I would assume, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that your approach to marketing was greatly influenced by you working on huge brands in New York City who probably saw the value of really working on brand itself. Mm-hmm. And you brought that with you down here. Am I right in saying that?
I think that you are right, although a lot of my experience at these behemoths of agencies is quite different. And a lot of the experience that I had in terms of structure, organization, just running the business is not applicable. It's not applicable at all. And so I've sort of had to relearn what it means to create a culture where people are thriving, not just surviving, people who love to do what they do and love to come to work. And it's been, I think, the most rewarding part of my career is building this agency and helping to support the coworkers and see them excel and do what they love.
you are listed as the creative director in addition to your CEO responsibilities. And of course, Brittany, who was here and we just talked about it, she, I think, is the associate creative director, if I remember correctly. So she's kind of your right hand to some degree, right?
That's right.
Is it normal, and I don't know, is it normal for the CEO to be the creative director, or are you the creative director primarily because that's who you were, that's how you started, and you're just going to hang on to it?
I'm not going to hang on to it forever. I know that I have to let go of that aspect of the business in order to be an effective CEO. I think once we find the right person, so Brittany Cindy is a fantastic brand strategist. So once we find that sort of the ACD level person who can really support the brand design, so the visual aspect of not only branding but also marketing, I think I'll be ready to let go.
You will reluctantly
release
the reins.
I think I will happily release.
Will you?
I trust my team implicitly, and I want them to kind of be better than I ever could be.
Right.
So I look forward
Well, that's
to
a good way to be. So let's back up just a little bit. You've been here 4 years. You joined Fuel 4 years ago. You found them. You went to work for them. Everything worked out great. And then some way, somehow, a year ago, you wound up buying it all yourself, and now you are the sole owner. How did that work out? How did that happen?
Well, 4 years, well, now 5 years ago, probably, when I discovered Fuel, they were in the midst of a rebrand. So it was the perfect opportunity for a creative director to step in and reinvent the company and reinvent the brand. And so from day one, I helped support the company in the reinvention and decided and helped the team shape the new path forward. Right. And from
so you put your stamp on it right away.
Yeah, it always felt like everything that I had, I put into Fuel. I mean, just believed in it from the start. And so it always felt like my heart and soul was there and an opportunity presented itself, and I jumped in with both feet.
Why is it that the branding is so absolutely important? And is branding more important for the big guys or the small guys, equally as important, or what?
So I think branding is incredibly important. I mean, it distinguishes a business in loud and crowded markets. It helps differentiate companies. And I don't care if you are the smallest company or the largest, it's equally as important. And I think that many people misunderstand branding. So branding is gigantic, right? Yeah. There's so many aspects of it. But if you just focus on brand design or brand identity, we refer to it as brand design. Many of our clients come to us thinking they have a brand. They're ready for lead generation. They're ready for additional sales or put heads in beds. But when we look at their company and their brand, we look at it through the lens of brand strategy and brand design. So brand strategy, we want to understand, do they understand their target audience? Do they have a mission? Do they have a promise? Do they have their clear differentiators, clear tone of voice? And from a brand design standpoint, I want to know if the brand passes the thumb test. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
Okay, so imagine you're looking at a website and you use your thumb to cover the logo of the website.
Do you know what they do?
Can you recognize the brand? Is the brand distinct? Is it memorable? Is it recognizable? And if you can cover up the logo and still recognize the brand, then it may have a strong brand.
You know, Brittany and I think, as I recall, we talked about this specific thing. I would guess that you have people that come into your agency and they think, Mary, I don't need help with that. Let's not do that. Let's get right to this.
Yeah.
And you have to say, no, we need to start here. I bet that happens quite a bit.
All the time. They say, we have a logo, we have a color, we have a font, we have a brand guidelines that shows you how to use our logo. And that's okay. And you can create campaigns with that. But I say a brand is more than a logo. What's your photography style, iconography style, information graphic style, elements, patterns, textures, sounds, mnemonics, haptics, sense. I mean, there's so much, and I can go on and on. There's so much that's contained.
I'm sorry, I got to stop you. Did you just say sense? As SCENTS.
Hotels, casinos.
That's right, hotels now.
Know this
Yes.
well. Hollister back in 2000.
Yeah, right.
I mean, 25 years ago understood this. And I think as we have all of these different options to create identities, you have Canva, you have AI, you have, people on Upwork who can charge you $5 for a logo. I think, and there's also this crazy saturation of companies. Every URL is taken. I don't know if you've gone through a naming exercise.
Yes.
It's painful.
Yes.
Every URL is taken. Every name is taken. You have to start to change letters, add words in order to differentiate yourself. So branding, I will say brand design is so important to differentiate your company.
So you got a person, they come in, they sit down, they want to jump right to, they want to jump right over here, and you're bringing them back here. Is there times when, that they're just not going to go there? We're just going to have to directly go up here because they're getting their feelings hurt, maybe. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I would assume that happens a lot. So at some point you might just say, okay, I'll come over here with you, right?
I think over time, you have to form trust, right? You have to have a partnership where you can have open dialogue, and we're not going to jump in and say, your brand is trash. We're going to say, we're going to go through this together. Yeah. We can create a campaign now. Let's take an iterative approach. Let's start here, but let's talk about it, because every brand should also convey meaning, right? So I'll start asking some hard questions. Why did you make this choice? What does this mean? Why is, you talk to a typeface designer, there's so much meaning and intentionality that goes into fonts, right? Every single curve is rooted in history and research. And so when you select a typeface, you're selecting a lot of different decisions that are also going to be reflective of your brand. So everything that we recommend is going to be grounded in some kind of meaning and some kind of logic. So it's not going to be, I don't like your logo. I don't care for your colors. No, what do those colors mean? Is that what you're trying to convey? Right. So we try to remove the subjectivity. So it's not personal. This is what you have a really solid understanding of what your brand needs to communicate and to whom. And we just help filter that through the lens of brand design to help you reach the right audience.
I can see that strategies and then tactics are, a direct descendant of brand, right? And so I can also imagine that even though you might have qualms with someone's brand, generally speaking, and if you do, that's going to make strategies and therefore the tactics a little bit difficult.
That's right.
And so you might have to recommend strategies and tactics that you otherwise might not recommend if these people don't want to go back and start from the beginning. Am I right about how that process might work?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, you have to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Right. And really understand what their business objectives are, what they're trying to achieve. You have budgets that you have to work within, restraints, you have deadlines. And so take all of that into consideration. And I think you can't just change a brand or a business in a day. It takes time, and it takes trust, and it takes a lot of planning.
Talk to me about Fuel's brand. You say, several years ago, you were on the ground floor of reestablishing what that brand looks like. Tell me what that brand is today.
The brand, I think, like any good brand, needs to continue to evolve and grow. I think that's one mistake a lot of brands make, is they establish their brand identity and they think they're done. And I think that you're never really done, that you're constantly needing to assess that brand, and you're going to evolve over time. And right now, we are working with a wonderful illustrator to help bring what we call the feed, which is our blog articles, to life in a way that is more unique, more distinct, more us, because that's going to give our articles a different feeling that is more distinct and unique, which is our point of view. So I think we're going to evolve, we're going to change, but we're happy with our brand, but I don't think it's ever done.
I'm glad to hear you say that because I started Let's Talk Business 6 months ago, maybe not even quite that long. No, not quite that long, 5 months ago or something. But I have changed my mind 22 times over this initial stretch about, just about all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
And you're telling me that that's okay.
That's okay. I think
to a degree.
I think that there is, we have this unique process called the brand blaze, which is our approach to brand strategy.
What brand? What?
The brand blaze.
Blaze. Got it.
Blaze. And it's a 5-step process in order to develop your brand strategy. And so I believe that if you start with that process, you're creating a foundation for your brand that will help you steer your brand during the right path. So as things evolve, you're sort of evolving in the right direction, but you're not going in different directions.
So, Mary, I've pulled your website up here and I'm looking at it. How long has this website been up as it is right now?
Probably a year. We're actually on the heels of a new refresh of a few of our pages just to streamline things and to continue to evolve our brand, as I spoke of before.
Tell me about the process that went into what makes, a homepage, because I did it not too long ago. That's a huge deal, right? And I'm from the newspaper business, right? So I consider this above the fold in the newspaper world, right?
That's
so
the
I'm
web
looking.
world too.
Okay, good. So I'm above the fold. Is this the most important piece of the website right here? It's supposed to tell you what you do, right? Who you are, what you're about.
That's right.
Correct?
That's right. It still is the most important part of a web experience. You have seconds in order to make someone's mind up about your business. I think it's much like you meet someone in real life and you decide on that person. I think it's milliseconds.
Right.
You decide whether or not you like that person or you don't like that person based on their clothing, their facial expressions, the way they look. And I think websites are the same thing.
Mary, I'll get you out of here on this. I would guess that when times are tough, and when I'm talking about times are tough, I'm talking about 2008 times are tough. Right? When economy gets rough. I mean, even over the last couple of years, as we've been struggling with some inflation, things are getting better now. But, people get a little skittish, right? And I would think in tough times that your brand is more important than ever.
I could not agree more. I think that branding is a really critical investment in any business, but particularly in economic downturns. It is really the beacon of trust and familiarity that's going to get you through. I think that the other opportunity that downturns present is the time to step back and analyze and assess your brand and ensure that it is reflecting your why. It is reflecting your promise. It is differentiated in the market. Does the brand pass the thumb test? And I think people are going to connect with the brands that they trust. And so you need to establish that trust, and branding is a great way to do that.
I would guess that another time that happened not too long ago where people had to really rethink things was in 2020, March of 2020, this thing called COVID came along. And so many of us did that thing that came into our lexicon that we really hadn't thought of too much before, and that's pivot. Yeah. So many of us pivoted from one thing to another, which would require, in some cases, going against brand or reestablishing brand. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think that Fuel, in particular, took a look at our capabilities, right? We're actually not a full-service marketing agency anymore. We have decided to specialize in a niche. And so our specialization, as I mentioned before, is really brand strategy and brand design and, brand first marketing strategies. And I think that COVID allowed us the time not to only connect and you learn new ways of working and become closer and stronger as a team, but also just reassess that we don't have to be so big, that we really need to be experts and focus on what we do best.
Good advice. Mary, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are welcome. Folks, that is Mary Church Cornette. She is the CEO and now the owner of Fuel marketing agency here in Greenville. Thanks for joining us, but don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick 60-second break, and we're going to come back with Bob Morgan. Bob is the CEO at the South Carolina State Chamber of Commerce. We'll be back in about 60 seconds.
I bet you want a website that drums up business. You see, every business wants to have an effective online presence that helps their business grow. At Drum Creative, we guide you through our process that will drive results by clarifying your message with a beautiful design that's strategically optimized for search. Visit our website at drumcreative.com and let us help you drum up business by designing a website that speaks to your audience and delivers results.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Business South Carolina. I am your host, Rick Jenkins, and I am so glad that you're with us, whether you are checking out our video on YouTube, or maybe you have downloaded our podcast on Spotify or Apple or Google. However you are accessing the content, I am certainly glad that you are here. My next guest today is Bob Morgan. Bob is the CEO at the South Carolina State Chamber of Commerce. For those of you who don't know, the State Chamber promotes job and business policies at the state and the federal level, and they do a variety of things to help their members. And they basically are the leading voice of and business advocate for business executives and businesses throughout the state of South Carolina. Now, before Bob came down to South Carolina, he was in Charlotte, North Carolina for quite some time, about 13 years, I believe. He'll correct me here in a sec. And he was the CEO at the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce. And my gosh, did Charlotte have a nice run while Bob was there. Make sure I get this right. During his 13 years there, they announced the relocation or expansion of close to 800 companies, 70,000 jobs, and $7 billion in new investment. And then Bob decided to bring his business acumen down here to South Carolina. Welcome, Bob.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me, Rick.
It is good to have you. Now, our studio is in Greenville, and you sit and reside in Columbia. Did you come all this way today just to hang out with me?
Just for you.
I feel privileged. I wish, though, that you had had another appointment or two, so I wouldn't feel like I'm taking up all your time. But regardless, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Before we get into business, Bob, let's talk personal stuff. Tell me about yourself a little bit, where you're from, and give me the lowdown.
Spent most of my life in Charlotte. Grew up there. My family moved there when we were 6 years old. When I was 6 years old, and
where were you born?
I was born in Rome, New York, and there's an economic development angle to this story. So my father is from the Charlotte region. Out of high school, joined the Air Force, was stationed in upstate New York, where he met my mother, started a family, got married, started a family. I was born in Rome, New York. The winter of 1971, we had 174 inches of snow. Oh my gosh. And Dad said between that and the taxes and the labor unions, we're moving south. And he took a job with the Charlotte Police Department. I was 6 years old, and we were ahead of the future migration of families from the Northeast coming down to the Carolinas. In the late 70s, IBM moved about 1,000 families from upstate New York. Royal Insurance in 1984 moved their corporate headquarters from Lower Manhattan. So we relocated, and then we watched a whole lot of others. And during my time, I was on staff at the Charlotte Chamber for 11 years. I was CEO of the Gaston Chamber of Commerce across the river in Gastonia. And then for 13 years was the president and CEO of the Charlotte Chamber. During all of that time, saw tremendous growth and was able to be a part of it through the work of the Chamber.
Well, you certainly were. And if I remember right now, your wife is a Gamecock, and you went to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Does that cause problems?
We've been married for 32 years.
You figured it out.
We've figured it out. That's right.
I hear you.
That's right.
Well, Bob, let's talk business. The State Chamber, I kind of want you to just kind of give me that elevator speech a little bit about the State Chamber of Commerce, but I want to set it up here for you for just a sec. You all are a leading advocate in South Carolina for things like tax reform, lawsuit reform, developing workforce initiatives, a variety of things that impact business in South Carolina in a variety of ways and that impact business executives. But kind of give me that elevator speech with that as a framework about why the chamber exists.
Yep. Well, every town of virtually any size has a chamber of commerce.
That's right.
Most states have a chamber of commerce or something like it. We're all different. There's a saying in the business, if you've seen one chamber, you've seen one chamber. We are a 501c6 nonprofit membership-based organization, close to 800 members. We do not receive any public funding. We're not funded by the taxpayers. Companies voluntarily join through membership dues, through other activities, sponsorships, and whatnot, to help fund the work of the organization.
So you're most entirely funded on membership dues, and I guess you do events, you do a variety of things that bring in some ancillary sponsorship dollars, but we're talking membership here.
Correct.
Okay, please.
And again, purely voluntary. But companies who have an interest in state policy, companies who have an interest in doing business across the state and want to be connected with others in the business community are the types of companies that we typically attract. Now, the elevator speech, our vision is for South Carolina's economy to be the most vibrant in the United States, creating opportunity and prosperity for all. Our mission is simply to be the leading voice for business, and we do that in 4 different ways. We promote free enterprise, we convene the business community, we work with partners and allies, and we define and advocate for a pro-business agenda, the kinds of issues that you just mentioned, whether it's tax reform, whether it's tort reform, workforce development type issues, helping to define and then advocate for that business agenda. Now, if you want to break it down further, what do we do? If you look at what we do externally, of course, you have to raise the money, you have to count the money, you have to do the internal stuff. But if you look at what we do externally, about 2/3 of what we do is lobbying at the state house level. Yes, we take positions on federal issues, but primarily most of what we do is directed at the state house. 1/3 of what we do is to convene the business community. We do something that perhaps we can talk more about, a Grassroots Tour, August, September, October, where we go out to the local chambers of commerce to engage them in a dialogue around the policy issues affecting the business community. We have coming up our annual summit where we'll have a couple hundred leading business people from the state come together for 2.5 days to talk about the role that artificial intelligence is playing in the economy, to talk about the upcoming legislative session, to give some awards out. And so the convening of the business community is the other 1/3 of what we do.
So, if I'm trying to boil it down, it sounds to me like you travel the state, you talk to business folks, you find out what's important to them, and you take that to the legislature and try to impact some form of change.
That's right.
If I'm boiling it down, right?
You're boiling it down. And let me tell you what we don't do. We don't recruit companies to the state. And that's a very common misconception about state chambers of commerce.
I would have assumed you played a part, but
we don't have a formal role. The South Carolina Department of Commerce, working with regional and local developers, they're the ones who are out selling South Carolina and trying to land the projects and bring them in. We're asking commerce, and we're asking businesses that are already here all the time, what are those policies that you need to either be even more successful, or what are the policies that might be holding you back? Right. And we then go work on those. But we get credit all the time. I wish I had a nickel for every person who's congratulated me on bringing Volkswagen and Scout to Blythewood. And I guess after a few times of denying it, you just take the facts and move on.
But you appreciate it.
But it is important to note that we're strong partners to the Department of Commerce and to the other developers. But that's not part of our role.
I got it. That's something you don't do, and I would guess another thing that you don't do or try not to do is step on the toes of local chambers of commerce that are throughout the state. But I would guess that sometimes you run into each other a little bit, but maybe I'm wrong. Tell me how those relationships exist.
Well, it starts for me as I'm a local chamber guy first. I spent a long time, many years, almost 30 years with the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce. Interestingly, through professional associations, there's something called the Carolinas Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives that before I ever got this job, I knew a lot of the execs here in South Carolina. We would find ourselves at meetings together, both within the Carolinas, but also at the national level. So I came into the job 2.5 years ago with a familiarity of a lot of the chambers that are here. Have proactively reached out to them to say, hey, we're partners. Most of them are members of our chamber. They're not subsidiaries of us. We're not a subsidiary of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We're a member of the U.S. Chamber, but we work closely. We convene the local chamber executives 4 times a year for formal meetings. We've grown from 1 representative of the local chambers on our board of directors. There are now 6. We continue to do the Grassroots Tour. Again, we visited 41 different local chambers, August, September, and October, to engage them in this discussion around the upcoming legislative session. And so we treat them like the valuable partners that they are. And here's part of the reason why. First of all, it's the right thing to do, but also talk to any legislator. And while we have a great lobbying team that spends a lot of time in the State House, and they're very credible, they do a really good job, any legislator will tell you that on a particular issue, to hear from 3 or 4 of their business people back home, the Main Street businesses back home, that's much more powerful than any statewide organization that's trying to lobby for something. And so for us, when we're working on issues that we share in common, and I guess we might disagree on some issues occasionally, it doesn't happen very often, but for us to be able to call a local chamber and say, hey, we need you to contact Senator X or Representative Y on behalf of a particular issue, that's a very valuable way to be an advocate for what we're supporting.
Right. And, just so people know, you're working with people at the local level like Carlos Phillips here at the Greenville Chamber, Alan Smith in Spartanburg, Pam Christopher in Anderson, those kinds of folks. And I know I've left out folks, okay? I'm sorry I can't say them all. But you have good relationships with those people. Tell me which chambers member presidents are on your board, if you can recall that.
So Carlos from Greenville, Carl Blackstone from Columbia, Brian Dareberry from Charleston, Rita Berry from Somerville, Dean Fail from York County, and Murphy Monk from Hartsville.
Good job.
You tried to get me in trouble there.
Excellent. I was sitting there wondering if you get all 6. Good job. Good job. All right, let's switch gears and let's talk about workforce. Workforce is a challenge. Mm-hmm. And workforce has been a challenge for us in South Carolina. It's not only South Carolina, of course, folks, but it has been a challenge for us for quite some time now, especially considering advanced manufacturing types of jobs that we constantly need, and it's hard to keep them filled. I know that you all do a lot of work with, spend a lot of time and effort with workforce challenges. Tell me how the State Chamber inserts itself into that conversation and how it impacts the end result.
Well, where we start is by listening to our members, right? And I'm sounding a little bit like a broken record now because the Grassroots Tour is our mechanism for doing that. Workforce has been and remains the number one challenge facing companies in South Carolina. We have maybe 100,000 jobs that are going unfilled. Just imagine the economic impact that could be generated if we could fill those jobs. And so if you look back to the legislative session earlier this year, if it had any theme to it at all, it was workforce, led by all of the leadership, frankly, especially the Speaker of the House, Merle Smith, passing a bill that now consolidates the state resources around workforce, gives the Department of Employment and Workforce kind of an umbrella role to help deliver and market those resources to businesses. One of the things we find South Carolina, in a variety of ways, through the technical college system, through the Department of Commerce, through DO, offers a lot of resources to companies. A lot of companies aren't aware of what those resources are. So hopefully with this streamlining, we'll be more effective at that. The other thing is we look at the labor force participation rate. South Carolina has a lower than average labor force participation rate, which is right about 57% versus a national average of 62 or 63%.
Explain that to me.
These are able-bodied of working age folks who are not employed,
okay,
and not in the workforce. And so at a time when unemployment is 3.2%, we're at full employment in particular. So a lot of conversation around how do we get that labor force participation rate up. Part of the answer there may be some folks who are in the gig economy who we're not able to count in the traditional ways. Somebody might be living in South Carolina, they may be working remotely for a company in New York, and we may not be counting that could be one of the issues. But we run into more traditional barriers to employment, something we've heard loud and clear this year, in addition to wages, in addition to lack of transportation, perhaps lack of affordable housing. Child care seems to be of growing interest. It's not just that child care can be expensive. In some cases, it may cost more to put children into child care than one is going to make in a particular job. That becomes a no-brainer of a decision. There's not enough of it. And then the child care industry faces the same worker shortage that every other industry is facing. We learned of an example down in Hilton Head of a facility that has capacity for 100 additional children. They don't have the teachers that they can hire to come in, and so those slots are going unfilled. So one of the things we expect to hear, we know, don't expect, but there's already been a joint task force set up by the House and the Senate to look at child care. One of the things they'll be looking at, there's currently a tax credit for companies who provide child care for their stipends for their employees. Exactly 20 companies in the state of South Carolina use that tax credit. Something's wrong with that tax credit. It needs to be tweaked. It needs to be better marketed. And it's not just South Carolina. We're seeing states across the country who are trying to figure this one out.
Now, the legislature, they go into session in January, is that correct? Right. Early January, I think, and it lasts, 5 months, 4 months, off and on?
That's right.
I would assume that this is going to be one of the main things you all will be talking about.
Absolutely. And, the broader issue of workforce, South Carolina is a very pro-economic development state. Last year, largest capital investment announced in the history of the state at $10 billion. What's the number of jobs? 14,000 new jobs that go with that. We want to remain very competitive in bringing companies like Volkswagen and Scout and the battery manufacturers and the lithium producers that were part of that. But if you don't have the workers, at some point these companies can't come in and grow, and your existing employers can't fill the jobs that they have. So workforce is going to be with us for some time. It is somewhat of a global issue. There was a book 20 years ago, The Coming Jobs War, that talked about the global competition for talent. I like to look at the subject from very broadly. What do we need to do to meet the challenge? We need to better prepare the organic talent that's already here. Get that labor force participation rate up, get K through 12 improved, fund and work with our technical college system and our institutions of higher learning to prepare people for the jobs of today and tomorrow. We need to keep South Carolina attractive. We're a fast-growing state. People are moving here. I like to say we don't want to just get our fair share of the migration of folks from the Northeast and the Midwest to the Southeast. We want to get more than our fair share. What are we doing to keep our state attractive, to bring that talent here versus it going to North Carolina or Georgia or Tennessee? And then third, and this isn't the most popular thing, but as a country, we need immigration reform. Yes, we need to protect our borders, but we also need to figure out the people that would like to come here to help fill the jobs that those of us who are here are not filling. We need to figure out a way to reform the immigration system, to bring more talent here, to help us fill the jobs that we have and to continue to grow the economy and prosper.
That is quite the controversial topic, as you alluded to. Another topic that is somewhat controversial as well is the fact that there is a push amongst some to change some laws to where felons that get out of prison would more easily be able to find work. Do you all have anything to do with that?
Oh, we've supported that for nonviolent offenders. Nonviolent. Making it easier for them to enter the workforce because they face all kinds of barriers. Yeah. And there are some companies who would rather not go there, and that's their right. There are other companies that see that as a potential source of labor and of talent. And so, and that too is a national trend that we've seen across the country. Eliminate check the box and find ways to make it easier for, again, nonviolent offenders to find their way into the workforce.
You mentioned the technical college system here a little bit ago, Tim Hardy and all of those tech college presidents like Keith Miller here in Greenville as an example. There is not an organization that is probably more helpful to advanced manufacturers in South Carolina than the Tech College system itself. I know that there's constant meetings with those folks to see what the Tech College system can do to help within this workforce challenge. Do you all work with the Tech Colleges, and if so, how?
We work with them very closely. And I will share with you another personal note. My mentor at the Charlotte Chamber, the guy that hired me, is a South Carolinian, Mr. Carroll Gray, who's former CEO of the Greenville Chamber of Commerce before he went to Charlotte in 1984. He's from Gray Court here in the upstate, of course. I heard for years, working under Carroll's tutelage, how North Carolina thought it had the best community college system in the country, but that South Carolina's technical college system was far superior as an economic development tool, producing the talent to meet the needs of the employers in the economy today and the ones we want to bring here tomorrow. So I came into the role with an appreciation for the technical college system, thanks to Carroll. We work very closely together in multiple ways, most notably funding requests, helping to support them through the budget process. In the last couple of years, the workforce scholarships that basically provide free technical college tuition for anybody who's going into one of the fields that's in demand in our economy. We've supported that in public ways, testifying in the State House, writing letters, resolutions, whatnot. We have a couple of the technical college system presidents on our board of directors, so they're at the table as we convene the business community around workforce and other issues. We actually have some conversations going about trying to get out of the box and find some ways that we can partner together, perhaps bring some resources from the private sector that the technical college doesn't already have, to try to get at the challenge of that labor force participation rate. We're in the very early stages of brainstorming, but on my way here today, I had a note from Dr. Hardy's office. We're trying to get that meeting scheduled. So we appreciate the role that they play, and we welcome opportunities to be supportive and to partner with them.
Let's talk about the grassroots effort that you were talking about a little earlier with the Grassroots Tour. Is that what you call it? And you said you went to, do I remember right, 41 cities over the course of a period of time?
Yeah, we had 26 stops, and there were 41 chambers in those stops. Our chambers went in together.
I got you. So what does that look like? You roll into a town, and what happens?
Yeah, so it may be a meeting of their board of directors. It may be a legislative committee. It may be a larger meeting of the membership. The size varies of each meeting. But we use a tool called Mentimeter. Mentimeter, we invite the audience to pull out their phones, their cell phones. They snap a QR code. The presentation shows up on their phone. It's also up on a screen. And as we go through the screen, we share information, data points, and then we ask questions. How do you feel about the U.S. economy? How do you feel about South Carolina's economy? What's the number one issue that's holding your business back? And we go through a series of questions around broad topics, and we see the results in real time as they vote. We then aggregate that data over, we had 897 participants this year, and we get calls from leadership in the State House. What are you hearing? And we will publish the results, and we will proactively share it with legislators, with policymakers at the state level, with business people, and just let them know what we're hearing from the business community.
Bob, I'm going to get you out of here on this. As we alluded to earlier, legislative session begins in early January, and we talked about a couple things that might be on the ticket for discussion then, including workforce issues. Is there anything else that might be coming out of that legislative session that business executives who are watching or listening would be interested?
Well, an issue that can be a bit obscure to the general public, but tort reform or lawsuit reform is an issue that's very important to the business community. And it's of broad interest in that South Carolina has a system where those companies and even individuals with the deepest pockets in lawsuits can be unfairly targeted to be held 100% liable, even though they may not be, but something much less responsible for whatever the
people go after the ones with the most money.
Correct. And And so that's very costly to business. It's very costly to all of us who pay for insurance. We pay more in insurance here than most of the other states around us. There's a particular area of focus, in addition to the broader, let's talk about the whole business community. Insurance for those who serve and sell alcohol. Talk to restaurateurs and bar owners and people that operate venues, and their insurance costs are going up. I've heard as high as 400% and 500%, and sometimes they still can't find companies willing to underwrite that liability. And so we have already seen a few bars and restaurants to close. We're likely to see others. There does seem to be a good focus on let's address that so that the insurance for them can be more affordable. We are all for that. We would also like to see the attempt made to address the broader subject of joint and several liability as well. There's a bill that's in a Senate committee that we think we have the votes, if we can get it to the floor, to get it through the Senate. We're encouraged that the House might be able to pass it, but there'll be strong opposition to it from the tri-lawyer lobby, and that's what we'll be up against.
Bob, great stuff, man. I appreciate you being here.
Appreciate you having me.
Folks, that is Bob Morgan. He is the president and the CEO at the South Carolina State Chamber of Commerce. Appreciate you joining us for another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. We'll see you next time.